Hi, everyone. Welcome back to TEXTing IRL, Ideas for Real Life, where we wrestle with the big dilemmas of our time through the lens of classical and modern Torah texts. I'm your host, Elana Stein Hain, and we're recording on October 27th, 2025. TEXTing is supported by the generosity of Micah Philanthropies and the Walder Charitable Fund, and you can find the sources referenced in this episode in the show notes. As a people, we've just started reading the book of Breshit, Genesis, a few weeks back. It's a book about world building, not only in a literal sense with the creation story, but in the social sense as well. Our matriarchs and our patriarchs are invited by God to build families and strike roots for the Jewish people. And while they're successful, their journey contains adversity. As synagogues across the world read the book of Breshit, our episodes on TEXTing IRL will do so as well, as we explore a moment or a concept that relates to what we're experiencing right now. And we examine how the stories of Breshit or the relevant rabbinic commentaries there might help us navigate our own reality today. In this coming week's Parsha, Chayei Sarah, we're introduced to a concept of the resident alien, the ger toshav, or more precisely, the ger vitoshav, resident and alien. Abraham calls himself that when he's negotiating with the Hittites to buy a burial plot for Sarah. And it really strikes me that the terminology of feeling both resident and alien echoes what many Jews around the world are feeling right now. As anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism rise, our sense of belonging is being questioned. And many of us are acutely feeling our minority status for the first time in a long time. How do we stay dedicated to our work of building Jewish identity and community in such an era? I think it behooves us to talk about it. And to discuss this experience and how we might reflect on it, I've invited Sarah Hurwitz. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here.
For decades, Sarah served as a political speechwriter, notably chief speechwriter for Hillary Clinton on her 2008 presidential campaign, as a senior speechwriter for President Barack Obama, and head speechwriter for First Lady Michelle Obama. So yeah, those memorable terms and phrases that you can't forget, I think we probably can thank Sarah for those. But since 2019, Sarah has been gracing the world with her communication skills in a new way by writing about Judaism. With her first book, Here All Along, Finding Meaning, Spirituality, and a Deeper Connection to Life in Judaism, after finally choosing to look there, and the word finally is underlined, and now her newest book that's hot off the presses, As a Jew, Reclaiming Our Story from Those Who Blame, Shame, and Try to Erase Us. Wow, wow, wow. Sarah, we are so lucky to have you here to talk about this. And I really want to begin with the text.
Yes.
So let's note the terminology that Abraham uses. He doesn't simply call himself a stranger, a ger. He calls himself both a stranger and a resident. And let's do the Hebrew. Ger v'toshav anochi imachem. I am a resident and, actually, I am really an alien and a resident with you. We call it resident alien, but he really puts alien first. Tnu li achuzat kever imachem. Please give me a burial site among you, and I added the please, ve'ekberamiti milfanai, so that I can bury my dead. Sarah had died. So the commentator Ibn Ezra immediately jumps on it and says, well, if he had said the word ger alone, stranger, that indicates somebody who's passing through. But a ger vitoshav is a stranger who's decided to stick around. So it seems like he's explaining himself. Why doesn't he already have a place to bury his wife? Because he's a ger, he's a stranger. His family's not indigenous, so they don't have land of their own. But why does he want a burial plot? Because he's not planning to leave. He's planning to be a toshav. He wants to be part of things. So this is sort of a moment of transition. When people who are indigenous hear somebody who says, I'm a stranger and I want to become a resident, take me through what you imagine their response is going to be.
Right. I mean, I think the first level of response is like, oh, is this a threat? Right. Does this person want to kind of insinuate themselves with us and do us harm? We don't know this person. By definition, they're a stranger. We don't know their intentions. We don't know their motivations. And then I think there's kind of the subtler threat of like, wait a second, even if this person doesn't actively cause us dire harm, are they going to kind of disrupt our social norms? Are they going to make us uncomfortable? Are they going to be the person in the friend group, who kind of comes and hangs out with the friend group that's been together since college and they don't know the in jokes and suddenly there's something sort of disruptive to the culture. And maybe there's something that feels a little presumptuous about it. Like, "Oh, wait, I'm sorry. You've just shown up here and you now want to be one of us." Like, there's sort of different levels, I think, of harm, threat, discomfort, disruption that people might feel at that moment.
Well, so it's interesting because when you say that, I use that lens to read the Hittite response because they
Ah.
respond to him by saying, "Oh, yeah, 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 no problem. You can have a plot for free." Right? And
Oh,
he
right.
responds back, "No, no, no, I don't want a gift. I want to purchase the land. I want to have ownership here." And that's kind of where things are getting tricky. It doesn't actually seem like they want him to have ownership. They'd rather he be a guest who's given a gift.
It's so interesting. I think that's a way of making it a little bit less threatening. It's like, you can come, but you don't have a vote, right? You can't actually materially disrupt things because you don't have a vote. You're just here. You're going to be a guest, but we're still in control, right? There's not going to be an actual disruption or threat. We're only going to give you so much power within this group. Guests have a lot less power than the actual residents. That's sort of a way of diminishing that a little bit. Maybe they
Yeah,
feel like that will diminish
it's
the harm somehow or the disruption.
right. Or maybe they're saying to him, Remain a Gair, be an
Right.
alien. That's fine. We'll treat you really nicely." Right.
Right.
It is funny because my own family story, my great grandparents came to this country in the late 19th century. And this is definitely the way that they thought about themselves. They
Mm.
were foreign, but they were planning to settle in the United States and forge their family's continuity there. And they definitely got pushback. And the funny thing is, I think within very few generations in the grand scheme of things, most American Jews would just call themselves toshavim,
Mm.
residents. Forget residents, citizens, meaning not guests, hosts, not transitional, but just
Right.
here. And the whole identity of Gerim has sort of reverted to the rearview mirror, perhaps until now,
Mm.
because people are starting to feel that side of being Gerim, feeling foreign, a little bit estranged. And of course, the Torah recognizes being a ger makes you vulnerable, right? All those special invocations not to oppress the ger indicates that we know that a ger is easily trampled underfoot. It is not a comfortable reality. When we called ourselves strangers in Egypt, we were talking about Egypt, or even Moses naming his kid Gershom because he was a stranger, a ger. That wasn't a positive experience. So let's talk about,
Mm.
especially because you've been in this
Mm.
for several years now, and
Yes.
certainly traveling around the country in the United States. Let's talk about this experience for American Jews right now.
Yeah, there's a real history to this that I don't think I fully grasped, and I think a lot of us just don't even know about, which is the history of our transition to modernity. And again, I want to be very clear, this has to do with Western Europe. Many Jews, including many American Jews, do not have roots in Western Europe. Their roots are in Africa or Asia. So, this is, I don't want to be Ashken normative here, but I think, given that many American Jews have European roots and given how important this story is to the American Jewish experience, I want to say it, but it is certainly not the story of all Jews by any means. But, as in
And
the
by
eight
the way, one wonders what we, as in the Jews from Europe, might learn from Jews who didn't
Yes.
have the experience you're about to describe.
And the answer is so much. There should be an entire podcast episode just on that, actually. It's such an
Yeah.
interesting story. But, this story is just in a very crude and simplistic nutshell. This is, Jews in Western Europe lived in pretty insular, isolated Jewish communities where you were just a Jew. You lived a Jewish life by a Jewish calendar under Jewish law. You were kind of, led by your fellow Jews in the small community. Plenty of oppression from outside, but you were pretty separate. Then suddenly, as people are given citizenship in modern countries, it's like, well, what do we do with the Jews? Because there are can they be Frenchmen? Can they be Germans? But they're also Jews, which is kind of like a separate nationality. And the way Jews responded was, no, 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 we're just like you. We're Frenchmen. We just go to a different church. We're Frenchmen of the Mosaic, as in Moses, persuasion. So this was the invention of Judaism, not as a peoplehood, a family, a civilization, which is what it is, but as a kind of Protestant style religion. But, in that effort to reform Judaism, a lot was lost. We kind of, the idea is to kind of create a Judaism that has Protestant parallels. So it's like they have a church, we have a Jew church, a synagogue. They say prayers in their church, we say them in ours. They worship God, we worship God. They have the Old Testament, so do we. In fact, we actually invented it. Hey, how about that? But
And
every
ethics,
and
certainly
ethics. Oh,
ethics.
prophetic morality, we're religion of
Mhm.
ethics. But those 2,500 years of post-biblical texts that are actually the beating heart of Jewish tradition in so many ways, the commentaries, the debates, in which are the grounding of so many of our modern, so many of our rituals, so much of our thinking and our ethical wisdom, those were really downplayed because there was not a
Mm.
Christian parallel, because, Christianity had really looked down on those texts, on the Talmud and all of that.
Well, it's kind of the legal tradition is a little bit more it's put in the background.
It's put in the background. And, I think the Judaism that I and many American Jews grew up with was that kind of Judaism. And I think that, separately, I think a lot of American Jews, you could kind of get away with this, like, oh, I'm an American of the Jewish flavor. Like, I'm an American, but I just like Seinfeld and bagels. Ha ha. I'm anxious and funny. Ha ha. It was sort of like Judaism as an ethnic joke, which you could
I
get
mean,
away with
I
that.
do feel anxious and funny. I just wanna say, I
I mean,
actually you did
same.
just speak to me. I'm just gonna
I
be
mean,
honest.
same, right? Like, obviously. But plenty of non-Jews are also anxious and funny, just, FYI. It's not really like our
Fine.
unique wisdom in the
Fine.
world.
Fine.
And look, in the 80s and 90s, you could get away with that kind of identity. No one's really threatening that. But, you know, suddenly it's like, oh, wait a second. Now that there is a lot of anti-Semitism, suddenly we're like, oh, shoot, we're Jews. We're not just like Americans of the, mosaic flavor, but I don't know anything. So what is that? Right? Suddenly there's this reckoning with the decisions we made 250 years ago that allowed us to be these kind of fun, contentless, like Seinfeld and Bagels Jews. But now, as everyone's attacking us, responding Seinfeld, Bagels, Tikkun Olam, to charges of genocide, it's not that effective, it turns out.
Well, it's so interesting, I would say for 2 reasons. One is I think if we had a Jew who felt, like, very culturally Jewish, who was the 3rd conversationalist on this show, I'd
Mm,
actually love to hear what they had to say about what that
right,
content means to them, because for you, it's
right,
clearly become flat, but
right,
I'm so curious because there are people who would say, "No, no, no, that's real and it's thick for me." It might
right,
not be what you choose, it might not be what I choose, but I
right.
am curious. I'd be curious. That meaning just saying that I'd be curious.
Yeah, I'd be curious, and I wanna be clear, when someone says, "I'm a cultural Jew," there are people who have very thick, rich Jewish identities. They're cultural identities. They relate to Judaism through thought, history, music, language, food. I mean, that's gorgeous. That kind of cultural identity, I think, is quite powerful because you know the Jewish story, you know history, you know thought. Like,
It's
whether or not you're,
interesting.
quote, "religious," I think that's a very thick, powerful identity. What I'm talking about is the contentless Jewish identity, which to call it
Mm.
a cultural Jewish identity, I think is very unfair. I don't think it's a cultural Jew
Saying
identity.
culture has to be thick as well.
It's sort of like an ethnic joke identity as a Jew. That's what it is. A cultural Jewish
Well,
identity can be quite profound. I would never, ever diminish that. I know many Jews who are legitimately cultural Jews. I mean, maybe even I might in some ways fit in that category. I'm talking about the contentless Judaism as an ethnic joke identity, which I think I used to have growing up in the 80s and 90s, and many Jews today have. And I think they're really hitting the limits of that.
but the issue is that what comes with it is actually the ability to not be the gear anymore, to not be vulnerable. So the question really is if you're going to choose to say, wait, I don't want to jettison the content, and yet I still want to fit in,
Right.
that might be a little bit difficult. Like, I'll tell my own story. In my family, the way that I grew up, a lot of people will say sort of the highest tagline of, highest was created to help Jews, and now we help others because we're Jews. In other words, we used to be the Ger, we used to be, and now we're not anymore because we've managed to fit in, right, in a very, very deep way, which, by the way, is part of the reason for anti Semitism, right? Hey, you fit in a little too much, and we actually want to keep you a little bit separate. But in my family, it was more no, 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 no. You never actually lose the ger status, even when you become a toshav. And
Mm,
that's for 2 reasons. One is vulnerability is always a possibility, right? Anti-Semitism can rear its head again. It's not we were vulnerable, so we help other people now that we're strong. It's we were vulnerable, we're strong now, We help other people who are vulnerable, but we also could be vulnerable. Like, don't pretend that that's not a possibility. That's number one. And number two, which is much more, affirming, is actually Jewish particularism. We want to be apart. We don't
Yes.
want to completely fit in. And if you look at Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik's reading of this Ger V'Toshav, that's exactly the model that he's offering. So he says, and we put this in the show notes for people who want to see it, Abraham's definition of his dual status, we believe, describes with profound accuracy the historical position of the Jew who resides in a predominantly non-Jewish society. He was a resident, like other inhabitants of Canaan, sharing with them a concern for the welfare of society, digging wells, contributing to the progress of the country, and loyalty to its government and institutions, right? I'm a Frenchman. I'm a German. Right?
Right.
I'm an American. I'm a Canadian. Here, Abraham was clearly a fellow citizen, a patriot among compatriots, joining others in advancing the common welfare. However, there was another aspect, the spiritual, in which Abraham regarded himself as a stranger. So all that, what you described as emancipation, Ashkenazic experience, a European experience, was we actually want to be fellow citizens in everything,
Right.
not only in the civic participation, but also in the spirituality. We want to be in the same boat. His identification and solidarity with his fellow citizens, Soloveitchik continues, in the secular realm did not imply his readiness to relinquish any aspects of his religious uniqueness. His was a different faith, right? Meaning that's the idea of stranger here is not vulnerability. It's
Right.
actually there has to be some way in which there is something unique about being a Jew, right? And so that's really the question is like, is this realistic? Meaning you yourself have gone on this journey where you're writing speeches for the First Lady and the President of the United States. You are a toshav, you are a resident, you are a citizen, you are in it. But now over the past few years, you've sort of chosen to say, oh, I want to take back some of my Gera status. I want to take back some of my particularism. And I'm just so curious what brought you there. Like, what was
Yeah.
it a moment? Was it it's fascinating.
Right. I mean, it's so funny. This really strikes me as being about the dignity of difference, as Rabbi Jonathan Sachs pointed out. Like this idea of like within Judaism is the universal. We're all created in the divine image, not just Jews, everyone, right? God,
Yeah.
the Torah starts out with a relationship between God and all humankind. And then, God then has a particular relationship with Abraham and his descendants. And also, that doesn't exclude God from having just as important and beautiful and unique and wonderful and valuable relationships with different other kinds of people. And it's funny, as for my own journey, I was raised with this very minimal kind of, like kind of Protestant state shaped Judaism in some ways. It was like Judaism was our religion. We kind of half-heartedly went to the temple a couple times a year. We did the boring services. My friends had Christmas, I had Hanukkah, they had Easter, I had Passover. Passover was kind of boring and there were no Easter eggs. It was like that was the kind of identity. And I think I felt much more at home in some ways in being an American, right? It
Yeah.
was really like
Sure.
I was the toshav, I was the American, and I kind of felt a little uncomfortable in Judaism. Like when I was
But
around
you
Jews
felt
who
like the
actually
gear in
I felt
Judaism.
like the Gare in
You're
Judaism,
like, what am
very
I?
much so. Like I was like, I don't know, I'm just a cultural Jew, which again didn't know a thing about Jewish culture, so that's not fair, right? I think that's a
Meaning you
real
used it as a moniker for
right, for
something,
something
but
else. It was more
yeah.
like, I'm a contentless Jew who doesn't know what this is about, and I'm kind of embarrassed by it. That's really what I meant
Wow.
by just a cultural Jew. But, I about 12 years ago, I randomly wound up taking an Intro to Judaism class thinking I should learn about my culture. It was like I'd broke up with some
Wow.
guy, and I just was looking to fill time. It was nothing
It
meaningful.
was a rebound. Judaism
It
was your
was a
rebound
rebound. It
relationship.
was totally my rebound relationship.
I like that.
And I have to say, what I found in that class, it was our texts. I was like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, wait,
Wow.
I'm sorry. I thought there were 2 Jewish texts. Prayer book in hands, which I thought was a small font version of Torah on the scrolls, which it, like, sort of
Wow.
I mean, it's like, that there were 2 texts. That was it. And suddenly I realized, oh, no, there are millions and millions and millions of pages of Jewish text with 4,000 years of profound wisdom about the human condition. Wait, wait. I'm sorry. Where had this been all my life? And again, that's the legacy of the emancipation, right? That's the Protestant shaped Judaism where that 2,500 years was we kind of ripped out
Or
that beating heart to fit in. And
oh,
so I think confronting that, as I got deeper and deeper into that tradition, into Jewish community, into Jewish peoplehood and family, I started to feel less like a stranger in Judaism and in some ways a little more like a stranger in America. The countercultural Jewish ideas, I saw them flying in the face of a lot of, look, the vibe of American law is you do you as long as you don't hurt other people too much, right? As long as you
Right.
don't
The more
assault them.
individualistic.
Yeah, more
Yeah.
individualistic, more narcissistic. And I began to feel a little bit estranged from that. And I will say after October 7th, that process really was on steroids. I'd actually almost say after the Gaza War of 2021, um, that's really when that process started to accelerate. As I
Wow.
saw, frankly, the ugliness coming from my own side of the political spectrum, the left, as I visited a
Wow.
college campus and kids in like 2022 are telling me about anti-Semitism they were experiencing. That kind of journey from, toshav to ger in America and ger to toshav in Judaism was only kind of accelerated.
That's fascinating.
I felt close to God studying these texts in a way that I don't
Wow.
necessarily in a shul. Like
Wow.
I felt like I was hearing strains of the divine voice through the voices of my ancestors. I was sort of like the recipient of this process, which in a way has been handed down for thousands of years as my ancestors were wrestling with what it means to be human and what they thought was asked of them by the divine. Like this is sort of where I don't know, I found to me it's not
Interesting.
I don't relate to it like when I read a great secular book, it's more like my soul is stretched in new ways. My heart is stretched in new ways. That's more how I related to it. I mean, this is the problem when we kind of have this kind of Judaism that says there is one Jewish spiritual practice. It is doing responsive readings awkwardly in a shul 2 times a year. That is Jewish spirituality. Many Jews like me are like, no, thank you. No,
But
thank
you know
you.
what? I just wanna say that there are so many people who take for granted what you're describing, and actually
Yeah.
because it's the water they swim in all the time,
Yes.
they don't it doesn't actually shock and amaze and inspire the way that you felt specifically because you were missing something and you found it as an adult. So,
That's the
I
thing.
also
Yeah.
it's in some ways you're very fortunate that that is something that really appealed to you. But you know what? I wanna go to a third keep stretching as you're saying. I
Yeah.
wanna go to a third understanding of the ger, right? Because we have the ger as vulnerable, which is kind of
Hmm.
the most obvious. We have the ger as particularistic, which is a layer on which has affirmative elements, right? It's
Yes.
not you're affirming, like you say, the dignity of difference. But there's another use of the term actually with ger toshav, like really ger vitoshav in the Bible.
Hmm.
And that is actually that the Torah wants Jews to have in their psyche, no matter where they are, no matter where they are, that sense of being a ger vitoshav as a type of humility, a
Mm.
non-ownership, recognizing their own limitations. So, for example, the Torah calls the Israelites resident aliens in what we call today the land of Israel. That's pretty shocking. I mean, I understand saying you're resident aliens outside the land of Israel, and I understand Abraham being a resident alien at the beginning, but we're talking about settling the land of Canaan, which
Mm.
presumably means the Israelites should stop being strangers because they're at home. And yet the Torah tells us in Vayikra, in Leviticus chapter 25, Va'aretz lo timacher litzmitut. You cannot sell the land permanently. Ki li haaretz, because God says the land is mine. Ki gerim v'toshavim atem imati. You are resident aliens with me, right? The land is not yours to sell forever. You are limited in the face of God. And it's meant to be a virtue, right? Meaning
Huh.
it's not about, yes, of course, there's a vulnerability flip side to the coin, but it's not supposed to be about your vulnerability. It's supposed to be about your humility. And actually, King David uses it again when at the end of the book of Chronicles, when he's announcing that his son Shlomo Solomon is going to build a temple while he's not allowed to, he makes this big proclamation that you kind of feel like is his humility just like almost like washing over him. He says everything comes from God and we human beings are merely resident aliens before God. He says, Ki gerim anachnu lefanecha v'toshavim kechol avotenu. We are strangers and we are those who settle. Katzel yameinu al haaretz ve'ein mikveh. Says we are like shadows, right? But shadows flitting upon the stage. I don't know the exact quote. And we have no prospect. This is about finitude.
Mm.
This is a different kind of virtue. It's not about people backing you into a corner, and it's not about you just setting yourself apart. It's about you recognizing what it means to be human,
Mm.
limited.
I love this. It's like such a strong vein of humility. And there's also kind of some reverence that comes with it. It's like, oh, I don't own everything. Like only God owns things. This is a way I think of injecting a very much like a core identity as a stranger into into Jews, right? This is like your part of your corest of core identity.
So don't never consider yourself too much of an insider.
There is an arrogance that comes from being an insider, right? It's like when you own your own home, like, maybe you'll be a little messy. You kind of do what you want. It's yours. When you're renting, it's sort of a sense of like, oh boy, I better not trash this place. When you're a guest, it's like, I better be on my best behavior, right? You're not going to walk around in your sloppy old clothes when you're a guest. You're not going to, there's a certain decorum. There's a certain dignity with which you carry yourself as a guest in someone else's home. And I think that's really interesting. It almost says to me something about almost a kind of boundaries in some way. It's like, I don't know, like God is like, elevate yourself a little bit here, right? Like
And
in my
by the
land.
way, living here in Israel for a year plus, to me, the most compelling religious voices are the religious voices who say, how are we thinking of ourselves as gerim v'toshavim,
Mm,
as both strangers and those who are settled here, but never forgetting that we're here, but by the grace of God, right?
right.
Meaning, and we need to think about what that means. And I find that incredibly compelling because to me, that is a religious posture. Like, can we talk a little bit about that sense of the affirmative side of things? It's actually what can we do on our own track, even as we fight
Yes.
people trying to make us feel vulnerable and back us into the corner. But like, what does it mean to us in affirming our own identities?
Yeah. It's funny. I was reading about a recent Supreme Court case where there were it was a football coach who was doing Christian prayers at a public school, Christian prayers with the students on his team at the 50-yard line, I think, or somewhere on the field. And a Jewish kid brought a lawsuit being like, this is unconstitutional. It's a public school. Why are we doing Christian prayers? And the court actually decided in favor of the coach. And my first response was like, good. And then I was like, "No,
Wow.
not good. Not good. Not good." I
This is
really
like
was
your speechwriter self, your
exactly.
Jewish author self, like, boom,
Like, to
implosion.
right? It just implosion, and I was like, "No, that's awful. I don't want that kid to feel like a guest in his own house. I don't want the Muslim kid to feel that way, the Hindu or the atheist kid to feel that way." But I think we have focused so much in America on making ourselves comfortable, on fitting in, on being the same. And there's something about a reminder that we are different, that we actually have something unique and beautiful and important and different to offer the world, as do, spoiler alert, many other groups of people. I'm not claiming this is unique to Jews, right? Many groups of people have difference to offer. And I think that our difference is particularly countercultural and is kind of an antidote to many of the cultural ills that we are facing. I think Jewish
Well,
tradition actually offers specific wisdom that flies in the face of the narcissism and individualism and stupidity of much of our modern secular culture. I mean,
tell us what you really think.
I
Tell
know
us what you
exactly.
really think.
Like if we're being honest.
No,
I mean,
it's great. You're saying what you are sharing in such just a fresh way. Like you can feel what a revelation this is for you. And I
yeah.
think that comes across very deeply and in such an authentic way as someone who's gone on their own path to get here, right? Meaning,
Yes.
I'm not going to talk about the ills of secularism. I've never been part of it. Meaning, yeah, of course, I
Yes.
went to secular college and I loved it and I had the best experience while going to Minion 3 times a day. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Right.
I've never had it. And so it's
Yeah.
fascinating to hear your take. And I really just want to thank you for being willing to share it because
Oh,
I
my
do
pleasure.
think, the Ger Toshav, what you're saying is that sense of sometimes the place where you felt settled, you start to get a little unsettled. And the
Yes.
places that you've felt a little alien, this might be a moment for you to be welcomed in. And it
Yeah.
sounds like that's what you're trying to offer. I think suffice to say you've given us a deeper understanding of this Ger Toshav plurality that, yeah, keep bringing those lawsuits. But at
Right.
the same time, the particularism and the humility and limitation, those are actual virtues to be willing to explore during this time.
Yes.
So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much, Elana.